It was Friday the 31st of October 2014, Halloween afternoon, and 20-year-old Shaun Ritchie was seen on CCTV at a local shop in his hometown buying some items, probably in preparation for a Halloween party he and his friends would be attending later that night at a remote farmhouse. Shaun lived in the town of Fraserburgh with his mum Carol Ann, who was 38, and his 3 sisters. The town of Fraserburgh is located at the far east corner of Aberdeenshire and about 40 miles or 64 kilometres north of Aberdeen. According to Wikipedia, Fraserburgh is the biggest shellfish port in Scotland and one of the largest in Europe, and has a population of over 13,000. Shaun's dad, Charles Reid, who was 40, no longer lived in the family home at Fraserburgh, but the pair kept in touch, and Shaun had spoken to his dad just a few days earlier on the 26th of October to ask if he could come and visit. Shaun's dad, however, was working overseas in Saudi Arabia at the time, but said that Shaun could visit him when he got back. Shaun's dad worked offshore and had recently secured Shaun a job where they would be working together, so Shaun had lots to look forward to. Shaun spent the afternoon of Halloween Day in the family home, before in the early evening saying bye to his mum and leaving the house. As mentioned, he was then seen on CCTV at the local shop, before making his way with his 7 friends to the Halloween party, reportedly via a white van. But it's unclear if one of the friends was driving this van or if the group had hitchhiked. Either way, Shaun and his friends travelled together to a remote farmhouse just outside the village of Strichen for the Halloween party. The village of Strichen is about a 13-minute drive south of Fraserburgh, lying at the foot of Mormond Hill, which is famous for its 50-metre or 164-foot wide quartz rock white horse, and its 73-metre or 240-foot wide white quartz rock stag, both of which lie on the Mormond hillside. And according to the Undiscovered Scotland website, the horse was placed there to commemorate a Sergeant Henderson who died there in battle in 1794, and the white stag was constructed in 1870 by tenants of the land in celebration of the laird's wedding. I've actually put pictures and a YouTube video on our website for you to have a look at and just get a real feel for how big they actually are. So anyway, back to Halloween night in 2014. Shaun and his friends arrived at the remote farmhouse for the Halloween party. The farmhouse is located quite a distance away from the main road, sitting at the end of a long single-track dirt road and concealed from the main road by woodland. Little is known about what happened at this party, other than a fight broke out between members of the group Shaun was with and members of another group, following which, sometime in the early hours of Saturday the 1st of November, Shaun and his friends got separated into 2 groups. The 2 groups were then seen running from the farmhouse. It wouldn't be until Sunday the 2nd of November, 2 days after Shaun's mum had last seen him, that she became worried and started calling around his friends, asking if he was with them. However, she quickly found out that he wasn't with any of his friends, and that they hadn't seen Shaun since the early hours of the 1st of November, when they all ran from the farmhouse. Apparently, when Shaun and his friends split up into 2 groups, each group assumed that Shaun was with the other one, but he wasn't. Shaun was reported missing to the police on Sunday the 2nd of November 2014 at 8:45 p.m. What followed was one of the biggest search operations and missing person investigations that had ever been carried out in Scotland. The search took in a total area of 8 square miles or 21 square kilometres, much of this area being very boggy, as well as the wooded area near the farmhouse, which according to the Strange Outdoors website comprised of rowan, ash and spruce trees, but also was boggy and had thick gorse. The search area also covered 15 miles or 24 kilometres of ditches, rough terrain and large water areas. The search included over 200 officers, family and friends of Shaun, local people, mountain rescue teams, dive and marine teams, dog units consisting of 27 dogs, air support, a forensic soil expert, a geoscientist, psychological profilers, and even using ground-penetrating radar. The search for Shaun was massive. Despite the large amount of effort being put into the search, no trace of Shaun could be found. That was until Thursday the 6th of November, 5 days after Shaun had last been seen, when finally something was discovered. Now, there are a couple of different versions about this, one being that upon one of the many bogs in the surrounding fields and wooded area to the farmhouse being searched, shoes, a hooded top and a belt were found. The other version is that these items were actually found scattered over several of the fields surrounding the remote farmhouse. Either way, all of the items found were later identified as being Shaun's by both his family as well as the CCTV footage of him in a local shop hours before heading to the party with his friends, where he had been wearing grey jeans, a white t-shirt, brown trainers, and a grey hooded top. This footage was released to the public 12 days after Shaun was last seen alive. According to the Daily Record newspaper, on the 31st of October 2015, upon further searches in the area being carried out using ground-penetrating radar, animal bones and little artefacts were also found, but no other traces of Shaun. So the question was, why would Shaun have removed his shoes, his hooded top, and his belt? Did Shaun succumb to hypothermia and remove his clothes before falling into a bog? Some medical experts believe so. However, there are other theories, such as that Shaun had more than likely been drinking, as well as perhaps maybe taking some form of drug, and possibly could have been having hallucinations, and had removed his clothes and then perished out in the wooded area due to the harsh Scottish weather, which that night had dipped to 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But if that was the case, why was all that was found was Shaun's shoes, top, and belt, and not Shaun himself? How far could Shaun really have walked in the dark, under the influence of substances, without his shoes, in the harsh terrain of the forest? So harsh, in fact, that one police officer actually broke their leg during the search for Shaun, in daylight. Why was Shaun's body not found? While not too much is known about what happened at the farmhouse that night, other than a fight broke out, the police did interview Shaun's friends and others at the party that night, and it seemed like the police accepted their version of events about what took place. However, nothing is known by the family of what happened that night. The police, the partygoers, and Shaun's friends have remained tight-lipped on the matter, so the family are completely in the dark. But why was it that Shaun was the only one of his friends not to make it home that night? How, in fact, had his friends got home? And what about the 2 phone calls to emergency services in the early hours of Saturday, the 1st of November? What was that about? Who had made the call? Who had deemed whatever situation they were in scary enough to call the police in the first place? And then why cancel it? What had happened? One reason could have been due to the fight that broke out between the different groups. Then if Shaun's group had gone running from the farmhouse, then maybe they called back to cancel as the fight had dispersed. It's one possibility. According to Shaun's mother, though, it couldn't have been Shaun that called the police that night, as he'd left his mobile phone at home. Whatever the reason, the decision was made by the police not to investigate this call, and this caller has never come forward or been traced. Which leads me to wonder, why have they not come forward? What did they have to hide? Just another unanswered question. Now, while the searches were being conducted, missing person posters were also being distributed, and police officers visited pubs and other licensed premises, as well as speaking to the residents of Fraserburgh to try to piece together Shaun's last movements. Appeals were also made by the police for anybody with any information about the whereabouts of Shaun Ritchie to come forward, stating that as the days passed, they were becoming increasingly concerned for Shaun and his safety. By day 11 of Shaun's disappearance, the police were asking the public to check their sheds and outbuildings, but still there was no sign of Shaun. The family initially offered a £5,000 reward, just under $7,000, for any information that led to Shaun being found, and while numerous people did come forward, no new information came to light. This reward was later increased to £10,000, or $13,800. So to try and help locate Shaun, Police Scotland had also enlisted the help of Professor Lorna Dawson, who is Head of Forensic Soil Science at the James Hutton Institute in Aberdeen. In an article from North Sound 1, Professor Lorna Dawson said, "Material from the natural environment can transfer to objects of people through contact. Soil, vegetation and water can transfer onto clothing and footwear while a person is walking in an outdoor environment." So Professor Dawson was using this process of comparing traces of such material that had been found on the clothing belonging to Shaun to enable the police to prioritise areas to search based on the findings. While the clothing found could help inform the search area, unfortunately, there was no forensic evidence on the clothes that would suggest any criminal activity had taken place. Even though so many resources were being used in an effort to find Shaun, sadly, Shaun was still missing, and Shaun's family continued to be stuck in a nightmare. The search for Shaun would continue until December, when this eventually was scaled back. Police said that they would continue on an intelligence-led basis to trace Shaun, but made it clear that the case was being treated as a missing person inquiry and that there was no evidence to suggest that any crime had taken place. It would be 5 months later, in May 2015, when police would resume their search via helicopter. No, not because there had been new information, but because the police continued to periodically carry out searches in the area. And as it was better weather in May, meaning it hadn't been raining quite as much and lying water in the area would have receded, it would have been much easier to perhaps spot Shaun. Sadly, though, there were no sightings of Shaun during this search either. However, the family's hope didn't end there. Shaun's family decided to enlist the help of a Glasgow group called K9 Search and Recovery. This group had a Springer Spaniel that was a human remains detection dog. However, sadly, the Spaniel failed to pick up any scent. Since then, the major investigation team in Glasgow, Police Scotland Specialist Advisors, and the National Crime Agency have all reviewed Shaun's case and have all concluded that the case remains a missing person inquiry and that there is no evidence to suggest that Shaun had been the victim of any crime. They do, however, continue to keep an open mind and will act on any new information that is provided to them. In an article in the Daily Record on the 31st of October 2015, a year on from Shaun's disappearance, Detective Chief Inspector Matt Mackay, who led the inquiry, said that it is surprising in one respect we haven't found Shaun, given the resources we have put into it, going on to say that he found it difficult to see how Shaun could have gone beyond the search area, but as they hadn't found him as yet, then he couldn't rule it out, although also adding that there was no definitive evidential lines that they could follow that suggested he went somewhere completely different. He also said that they have left absolutely no stone unturned and that he would never ignore the prospect of criminality, but that there is no evidence to suggest this to date. However, if there was no evidence of Shaun being removed from the vicinity by others, then where is Shaun's body? Despite what the police were saying about this continuing to be a missing person inquiry, in the same article in the Daily Record newspaper, the world-renowned forensic expert, Professor Dave Barkley, said that the efforts that police had put into finding Shaun went over and above a normal missing person case, and that police were likely privately treating Shaun's case as a murder, going on to say that the police seem to be treating it as a no-body murder. They may have reason to believe he has come to harm, possibly due to the people he was with that evening, or due to him running from the farm. A belief that Shaun's dad, Charles, also shared due to the company that his son had been keeping that night. As mentioned, Charles had been working overseas when his son went missing, making it back to Scotland by the 3rd day of Shaun's disappearance. However, when he heard who Shaun had been at the party with that Halloween night, he immediately was worried and knew it was bad, going on to say in the same article as Professor Barkley that some of the people at the party that night were not the most upstanding members of the community, and that he believed that Shaun had been killed due to an unpaid debt. It's not known just how friendly Shaun was with the 7 other men he was in the white van with, or if these were the not the most upstanding members of the community Shaun's dad was talking about. And speaking of the white van, again, there has been nothing reported about this. It's not known if the police have tracked it down and ruled out any involvement of the driver or van in Shaun's disappearance, or if in fact this white van has ever been traced. It's a really frustrating case for having so many questions unanswered. But that is how the case stands, still being treated as a missing person inquiry, as there is no further information to suggest otherwise, being no further forward despite all the effort and resources that had been put into finding Shaun, and no answers for the family, who are still in limbo. So another question is, have the police done all they could to find Shaun? Well, Shaun's family certainly don't believe so. The family initially were grateful for all the police had done to try to find Shaun. I mean, it appears that the police had left no stone unturned, and yet there had been no trace of Shaun whatsoever. And so, as the reality hit that Shaun wouldn't be coming home, the family started to ask themselves, why had Shaun been running from the farmhouse? Was it to get away from the fight that had broken out in the farmhouse? Had it continued outside? Why was Shaun the only one not to get home safely? And why had he removed his clothes? Why was there absolutely no trace of Shaun whatsoever? And so the family eventually started to come to the conclusion that Shaun had been murdered, that there had been foul play, and they started to voice this theory to the police. However, as stated previously, with no such forensic evidence to go on, the police continued to state that there was nothing more they could do other than hope someone would come forward with some evidence, a witness maybe, someone who had been there that night, finally coming forward to say what had happened. However, waiting for something to happen, for someone to come forward, didn't sit well with the family. They just did not understand how Shaun could simply have disappeared, and why was no one saying anything. Police began to withdraw from the family, continuing to state that they would keep an open mind, but until any new evidence came forward, their hands were tied. So the family had no choice but to go looking for answers themselves. In May 2016, Shaun's aunt, Jenna, started a petition looking for justice for Shaun. On the Justice for Shaun page, it states that Jenna was looking for enough support in order to have Shaun's case looked into by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary without the corruption of Police Scotland. According to the HM Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland website, they provide independent scrutiny of both Police Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority. The problem was the family felt that the police had been duped by the witnesses at the party, that they hadn't told the police the truth, and that the police hadn't looked closely at the not the most upstanding members of the community that had attended the party, who were allegedly involved in drugs, and that they hadn't looked into the family's theory that Shaun had been killed due to his supposed debt. They weren't happy to simply wait for new evidence to come forward, but instead wanted these lines of inquiry to be investigated. This petition reached 1,720 supporters. I can't find anywhere what actually happened with the petition, but I also didn't find anywhere that the HM Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland had looked into this case. However, another petition was started in 2017, 3 years after Shaun's disappearance, again asking for the case to be reopened and suspicious characters and witnesses genuinely be investigated and not just brushed under the carpet by those in power who believe there was no foul play. It could be that following this petition the case was reviewed again, perhaps by the aforementioned Major Investigation Team, Police Scotland Specialist Advisors or the National Crime Agency. And we already know that these reviews concluded that the case remained a missing person inquiry and that there was no evidence to suggest that Shaun had been the victim of any crime. So more frustration and pain for the family, which finally led to Shaun's mum, Carol Ann, who in 2016 was 38 years old, desperately trying in her own way to get answers. Carol Ann had apparently been sending anonymous text messages to close friends and family of Shaun, suggesting he was killed. Apparently one message was a fake death threat, warning the recipient not to contact the police. According to the Press and Journal newspaper, on the 27th of August 2016, Carol Ann was charged with wasting police time. It's not really clear what these messages were about, but I can only speculate that it was an attempt by a deeply distressed mother to do something, anything. But there's not much information about this. It's just really sad what the family are going through and what they feel they have to do to try and get some answers. Whatever was said in the text messages, it was evident that Carol Ann was struggling, as would anyone be in her situation. She confirmed this in the same newspaper article, saying that she was struggling to cope living in Fraserburgh anymore due to the constant reminders of Shaun. The family had already moved home as the reminders of Shaun were overwhelming for them, and it became too difficult to continue to live there without him. However, the move had done nothing to help Shaun's mum. In an article in the Sun newspaper on the 23rd of November 2016, she was brutally honest about her feelings since her son's disappearance. She said that she'd tried to take her own life 3 times since her son's disappearance in 2014, as she just couldn't face going on without Shaun. She said that she relies on tablets just to get through the day. She still buys gifts for Shaun. She does believe that he is dead, but by buying him presents, it allows her to cling on to a little bit of hope that one day he'll come back home. She went on to say that, "Shaun is my baby boy, and I just want to touch him or speak to him. It tears me up inside that I can't." She is very suspicious about what happened at the farmhouse the night Shaun went missing, and she feels extremely frustrated, angry and let down that Police Scotland just will not entertain this line of inquiry. While Police Scotland have said that they completely respect the family's views and do understand the frustrations, they just keep saying that without evidence to suggest criminal activity, then they have done absolutely everything they can to find Shaun. On the 31st of October 2017, the third anniversary of Shaun's disappearance, his sister Nicole paid tribute to her brother, who would have been 23 years old, by posting a heartbreaking post onto the Facebook page she had set up in April 2015. It read, "3 years ago you left and went out the door, and we have never seen your face again. So hard being this long on, and no answers or closure about what happened to you. Every day is heartache, but today everything comes flooding back. You're always on my mind and will forever be in my heart. My brother, my friend. I miss you and love you so much." She said in an article in the Press and Journal newspaper on the 31st of October 2018, 4 years after Shaun disappeared, that she found Halloween particularly difficult. Nicole is no longer able to walk into shops at Halloween due to all the decorations, which just serve as another reminder of what she has lost. And then in an article in the STV News on the 16th of May 2019, 4.5 years after Shaun's disappearance and what would have been his 25th birthday, Nicole asked, "If you can take this pain away, come forward. Even with the littlest information, anything may help." She went on to say that every day is a living nightmare, that she puts on a brave face, but it's horrible that she never got to say a proper goodbye to her brother. She believes that something did happen that night, but she's unsure what, but that someone does know something. She said that Shaun was a really friendly person. He wanted to be friends with everyone, that he was funny, outgoing, and truly one of a kind. If she needed him, he would always be there for her. She will never give up hope of one day finding Shaun. While Shaun's dad, Charles, came to the conclusion quite early on that his son was dead and wouldn't be coming home, which was also backed up by a CID detective who told him that no one could have survived the conditions, he initially believed that the police had done everything they could to find his son. However, over time, his opinion would change. In an article in the Evening Express on the 31st of October 2016, 2 years after Shaun's strange disappearance, he said that he felt detectives had failed to properly investigate Shaun's disappearance, believing that the police have either been duped and lied to by those behind Shaun's disappearance, or that they had simply missed something. Either way, his opinion is that the inquiry was probably mishandled from the beginning, and that the police have failed miserably, but now they have moved on to the next case. Sadly, Shaun's family will never be able to move on. Shaun's wider family were also deeply affected by Shaun's disappearance, one being his Aunt Jenna, who also lived in Fraserburgh and had started the first petition for justice for Shaun. On the 16th of May 2016, the day Shaun would have turned 22, she told the Press and Journal newspaper that she was very close to Shaun and that he would come to her to talk about things and seek advice, and that she missed him so much. She said that the family would be marking the occasion by having a ceremony on the beach. So did Shaun become disorientated, get hypothermia and start removing his clothes before succumbing to the conditions and falling into a bog? Or was Shaun chased and caught that night by someone he owed money to? Missing or murdered? Shaun's whole family have struggled to get on with their lives since his disappearance, since he vanished one night without any trace other than his belt, shoes, and his hooded top, and are left with so many unanswered questions, the most important being what happened that night at the farmhouse, and where is Shaun? Sadly, since I first released this episode in October 2021, there have been no further developments, and Shaun Ritchie is still a missing person, having not been seen since the 31st of October 2014. In November 2021, Shaun's family called for a fresh investigation into Shaun's disappearance to be carried out by a different police force, as they feel that something in the inquiry has been missed. Shaun's sister, Nicole, said on STV News on the 3rd of November 2021 that, "We want our brother, son and friend found. It's a living nightmare. Every year is hard. Anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas." Nicole said that it's the not knowing what happened to Shaun that is the most difficult part for the family to deal with. She feels that someone out there knows what happened to Shaun that night. On the 31st of October 2021, the 7th anniversary of Shaun's disappearance, an exclusive documentary by the Press and Journal newspaper called Missing from the Broch, The Disappearance of Shaun Ritchie was aired, which includes interviews with Shaun's friends and family, although not the friends he was with at the farm the night he disappeared, as well as the police officer and scientists who led the search for Shaun. From this documentary, information that has never been brought to light or shared with Shaun's family was uncovered, including the names of the 5 friends Shaun was in the back of the van with the night he disappeared, as well as the names of the driver of the van and his passenger. Also, it details a much clearer timeline of Shaun's movements on the night of the 31st of October 2014. Shaun left home in the afternoon of Friday the 31st of October and was seen on CCTV at a local shop. He then apparently went to a local pub where he met some of his friends and had a few drinks. Later that night, Shaun and a group of his friends left the pub and met up with another couple of friends they knew who had offered to take them to a party in their white van. Before heading to the party, Shaun is then seen at the local shop by his mum about 10 p.m. His mum asked him if he would be home later, as he had forgotten his phone, to which Shaun replied that he would be home later and she wasn't to worry about him. Shaun then left the local shop and him and 5 of his friends then got into the back of the white van, looking forward to the party. Somewhere along the way, from Fraserburgh to the party, an altercation took place, where the detective in charge of Shaun's missing person inquiry said that one of Shaun's friends, who was very drunk, had been winding up the driver. And so the driver of the van, who presumably thought this behaviour might escalate, drove to his brother's farm in Strichen called Kersey Hill Farm, which had been close by, to ask him for help. However, upon the driver arriving at his brother's farm and getting out, the friends in the back of the van became worried that something untoward was going to happen, and so they ran from the van, 3 going one way and 2 going another, with each believing that Shaun was with the other group. Now, something of interest that was revealed in the documentary that hadn't been mentioned before is that apparently one of Shaun's friends he was with the night he went missing had been chased by a man wielding an axe, with the altercation taking place at Kersey Hill Farm, and the man wielding the axe being the driver of the white van who had taken Shaun and his friends to his brother's farmhouse, and that this had apparently caused the group of friends to run and split up, and apparently had caused the friend in question's top to have been cut by the axe. Now, while Shaun's family had heard a rumour about the axe attack at the farm that night, they never knew what had become of this. Well, it was revealed by Shaun O'Neill, the investigator behind the documentary, that the man who had driven the white van that night and had wielded the axe, who was the brother of the owner of the farm, had appeared in court in 2017, charged with assaulting a person with an axe at Kersey Hill Farm on the night of the 31st of October 2014, but he had ultimately been found not guilty. However, when this was put to Detective Inspector Martin McDougall, the detective leading Shaun's inquiry now, he stated that this line of inquiry had been investigated as part of Shaun's missing person inquiry, but that it had been determined that Shaun was not at the farmhouse at the time of the axe attack, having already ran from the scene. The documentary also gives more details about the phone calls that were made to the police from Kersey Hill Farm the night Stuart went missing. Detective Inspector Martin McDougall said that the first call to emergency services that night connected, but that nothing was said and the caller hung up. A second phone call was then made to emergency services immediately afterwards, and this time the caller said that there were people at his farm, but that everything was fine and the police were not needed, before hanging up. The detective believes that the call came from the owner of Kersey Hill Farm, which is now under new ownership, who was the van driver's brother. In the documentary, Shaun's sister Nicole states that she does not believe Shaun died of hypothermia that night out in the wilds around about Kersey Hill Farm. She believes something happened to Shaun that night and that he was taken away from the farmhouse by another person. Although Detective Inspector Martin McDougall said that they have to work on the evidence found and witness statements given by those that were there that night, who have all been interviewed at least 4 times and have given consistent statements, and from this there is no evidence to suggest that Shaun was removed from the area by another person. He did say that while Shaun is classed as a missing person, the case does remain open and criminality can never be completely ruled out. However, until such time as there is evidence or a witness that points in this direction, Shaun is classed as a missing person. Following the documentary being aired, an article in the Press and Journal newspaper stated that Dr. Alistair Ruffle, an expert grave finder, had revealed that he believed his new sonar drone technology could help assist the police in a fresh search for Shaun, an offer which the family of Shaun have urged the police to accept. And while it was reported that Police Scotland were in talks with Dr. Ruffle about this, these talks had been going on for about 10 months. And as of this episode coming out, no new search has been undertaken. No doubt the family of Shaun will be disappointed by this lack of development, with Shaun's sister Nicole saying in a Press and Journal article that it's nearly 8 years now since he went missing, and I still have been hoping and longing for answers and closure. It's what we deserve as a family. It's been torture not knowing the truth about Shaun's disappearance. Something needs to be done. Shaun is such a big miss to all. If anyone has any information, please contact Police Scotland on 101 or Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111 anonymously if you're in the UK, or the Missing People charity on 116000 if you're in the UK, or visit their website missingpeople.org.uk.